Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our Mindfulness in the Classroom lecture featuring Molly Diana. Just a quick bio about Molly. Molly Diana is a nationally certified and practicing art therapist who has taught art therapy experientials and art therapy models courses at CCS since 2014. Molly has a Master of Education from Wayne State University. And in addition to being a multidisciplinary professional artist, Molly is also the owner of Studio One Art Therapy, a practice that offers rehabilitation and recovery through creativity and art making. Molly's work as an art therapist focuses on the recovery process following any sort of trauma, the emotional intelligence and growth that is experienced when personalized symbols and myths are utilized to heal the mind and body.
My turn. Thank you, Brooke. So I'm happy to be here and to talk some about mindfulness and hopefully offer some suggestions and practical ways that we can incorporate that into the classroom on a daily basis. And I would begin by also emphasizing that that the teacher and their own sense of mindfulness is an integral and necessary piece to having that conversation about how do we incorporate mindfulness in the classroom for our students as well. So my first slide shows actually the amount of water, the percentages of water that are in the human body. And I like to use water as a metaphor for emotions and just sort of this overarching theme of recognizing that things are transitioning and shape-shifting and transforming and changing, and the brilliance of the water in the ability to find the lowest point, the ground, the ability to reconnect itself to its place and also to transcend in its ability to shapeshift, and just noticing how much water we have in our bodies. And so we are as brilliant as the water in making those transitions. So every classroom includes these three essential elements of the teacher, the students, and the content. And each of these elements brings its own sets of needs and wants, the past experiences with good and bad classes, and the present challenges with an abundance of hurdles to navigate, and future dreams to the mix. The unknowns bring a special kind of magic to the experience for all who are involved, and it cannot be predicted precisely or exactly the same from class to class. So this inevitably generates opportunities to evolve and transform through exposure to new experiences. So why does the practice of mindfulness matter to this? And it's because living life and relationships that change causes us to have emotional responses to it. So mindfulness is generally thought to be the practice of turning outward moving energies back inward toward ourselves, focusing our attention on our current sensory perceptions, our emotions and thoughts, and harnessing the energy or the power of the present moment. So growing inward as much as we are growing outward, reconnecting and reattaching to all the ways that we have been stressed to the point of fragmenting, dissociating, or separating our own awareness from ourselves. The external experiences of our lives generate internal emotional perceptions, which overlap with our sensory perceptions. And these perceptions travel through our nervous system and into our brains, where we learn to make meaning of them, and we store them in our memory. All of these emotions are true. They're as true as the physiological mechanisms that produced them. And all of our emotions are also neutral. It's our perceptual understanding of an emotional response to life that either welcomes or denies its purpose and meaning. The practice of mindfulness seeks to welcome all of our experiences as paths that are taking us toward our own ever-evolving wholeness. So stress in life is inevitable. We cannot grow or evolve without it. The key to thriving with increased strength under pressure is to understand the ways we grow more resilient in equal proportion to what life has asked us to become. Navigating the equilibrium between our internal growth and the ever-changing external circumstances applies pressure to our system and produces an experience of stress. And this dynamic between inner and outer experience constitutes what we think of as the relationship between the I that we perceive internally and everything else that is perceived externally as the other. But luckily, our systems are hardwired for growth. And it's the wisdom of our emotions that provide us with communicative clues and assist us with navigating our relationships to all others. In their most natural state, emotional responses to life are meant to flow, like water through the riverbeds of our days, automatically and easily. And when life is moving along easily, we barely even notice them. But life also delivers experiences during which we find ourselves struggling to adapt. The trajectory of our enthusiastic river meets obstacles for which we may not have the skill to navigate well, or for which we simply are not ready. Fear signals change is inevitable, but sometimes we don't want things to change. So we obstruct fear's movement, and the resistance rears up within us and the pressure builds. Defensive mechanisms get employed, especially if we additionally feel angry about the impending change. And we may look for ways to stall or barricade our feelings or barricade ourselves off from the discomfort. But although we may want to ignore or dull the sensations of our feelings, the force doesn't disappear. Like water behind a dam, a stagnant fear of the future generates chronic stress on our nervous system. And the lack of electromagnetic movement leads to debilitating bouts of anxiety and worry, panic, and confusion. Overstimulation due to fearful states of mind, including chronic anxiety, restricts the blood flow to some areas of the brain and damage parts that are important for learning, memory, and verbal language. In addition, our system becomes over-aroused by sensory perceptions of associated threats that results in patterns of hypervigilant overthinking, intrusive thoughts, self-criticism, or self-cruelty. Our nervous system is like a three-legged stool, a processing experience of pain and meaning through cognitive function, sensory perception, and emotional responses. Anxiety distorts the balance, obsessively searching for answers to preconceived questions and problems in an attempt to prepare ourselves for the worst. Since emotions often travel together, our anxiety may cycle alongside anger or sadness, shame, self-doubt, or jealousy, and the discomfort continues to mount, resulting in depression and other disabling constellations. Our greatest fears tend to reflect ways in which one or more of our essential needs feel threatened. These essential needs are connection, which brings a feeling of belonging, trust, which brings a feeling of security, and self-esteem, which brings a feeling of worth, self-worth, and value. We create patterns of beliefs about our self-worth, our ability to trust, and our sense of belonging all throughout our lives. But many of these patterns are adopted in early childhood, long before our cognitive capabilities can discriminate or filter out those which don't really meet our desired outcomes. As early as infancy, when our cries of distress are acknowledged by people who care about us, we learn to make attachments with others that feel secure. We learn greater trust in our own resilience, in our ability to self-organize and self-soothe. Neurological flexibility increases so that we can easily forge new connections as well as release those which are no longer needed. We maintain these learned skills into adulthood and thereby find it easier to balance pressures between the personal life and the professional life. We're able to effectively manage time for both rest and work, and we cultivate relationships that meet the desires and the needs of others alongside the needs and desires of ourselves. We learn to build relationships that offer reciprocal support and esteem. We become emotionally mature, lifelong learners, confident creators of our own reality, and intimately connected because we have embraced the vulnerability that scares us. So be aware of how you reconnect to yourself. Understanding emotions can be complicated, but our bodies provide many clues to tell us when we're feeling overwhelmed. Shoulders may tense, the stomach gets queasy, or blood pressure rises. Missing or ignoring these cues can result in a lack of clear understanding, making it more difficult to be comforted or regulate emotional responses. But many of the trusted mindfulness practices will shift our attention out of our brains and into our body. The overabundance of energy in our heads does find relief simply from reducing the concentrated load. Bodily responses to threat and danger are reduced through sensory stimulation that comforts and restores a sense of safety. The vagus nerve is a critical link between sensory stimulation and autonomic responses, such as our heart rate, blood pressure, our sweating, digestion, and speaking. And this primary nerve regains flexibility and tone with relaxation techniques, deep breathing, massage, and increased blood flow. So how do we get into a state of flow? What can we do to find our way back to center, to feel satisfaction with our unique place in the collective? How do we return to an inner sense of peace or happiness or clarity or comfort that we sometimes feel displaced from? So there's two ways to increase flow, right? One is to change everything that is not you or your outer game. And the second is to change your interpretation, your inner game. So today we're going to talk primarily about shifting our interpretation in our inner game. So the first thing we can do is we choose our attitude. We can suspend judgment toward the experience of having emotions as either good or bad until we understand them as our allies and not our enemies. This allows us to receive the gifts that each emotion has to offer and acknowledge that they're bringing up internal questions for us to answer in order to know ourselves better in the present moment. It's from this place that we have the power to move forward and respond to life in its ever unfolding movements with real authenticity and self-assurance. Without awareness of this internal guidance system, we're more susceptible to making choices that please others, but not ourselves. Sabotaging our dreams and needs, indulging the temper tantrums of our neglected inner child, or allowing others to determine our reality. So Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, in case anybody is familiar with him, wrote a book called Flow. He recently passed away, but many people compare the idea of the concept of flow with that sense of mindfulness and returning to what he described as optimal experience. So optimal experience is described as the state of being completely involved in an activity for its own sake. And this is that feeling of happiness or enjoyment or satisfaction with what we're doing in the moment, right? It's basically the opposite of discomfort. The flow chart here that he created demonstrates the quality of experience as a function of the relationship between challenges and skills. Optimal experience occurs when both variables are high. So we can use this chart for both the sense of changing our inner game, but also changing our outer game, right? So some of the flow chart assumptions are that negative perception of an emotion creates psychic entropy in the mind. And this states that we cannot use our attention effectively to deal with external tasks because we need to restore an inner subjective order. So that lack of inner skill is distorting our perception of our outer game or how we can achieve some success in our outer game. So it's also the full involvement of flow rather than happiness that makes for excellence in life. So it's flow that we're seeking and after, not necessarily the sense of happiness, right? To improve the quality of life, We make sure that clear goals and immediate feedback and skills balanced to action opportunities are maintained. And the remaining conditions of flow are as much as possible as a constant part of everyday life. So what are the gifts of fear? So for shifting our perspective of fear, rather than an emotion that we need to repress or deny or run away from, or one that we should not experience, and we shift our interpretation of fear as one that we're allying with our own internal sense of fear, then we can perceive fear from this perspective of it's bringing some gifts, it's bringing some messages into our life that might help us actually improve our inner game or our outer game. So what are the gifts? Fear brings a heightened intuition. It also brings focus and clarity and vigor and readiness. And I don't know about you, but these are things that I really incorporate or feel like are vital to my sense of optimal experience. So fear also asks the question, the internal question, what action should be taken? So it's an action-oriented emotion. It wants us to do something. There is an impending change, a transition that is that's presented to us, and we need to act. We need to do something about that. The practice of fear includes focusing on our fear. So sometimes people use that phrase, facing our fears, right? So focusing on fear, preparing yourself, and then acting and moving consciously. So that preparing of oneself is incorporated into this sense of mindfulness, right? So if we're returning our outward moving energies back home to ourselves internally, then we have the full amount of our power, our own energy, right? Who we are, what we want in life, what really stimulates us, gives us a sense of satisfaction. And then also, what are our skills? Like, what do we still need here? So we bring that energy back home, and we're prepared then to be able to take that action step and know unequivocally which one is the right move to make. Obstructions to our fear. Because inevitably we all have obstructions to our fear. We're stalling it. We don't want the change to happen. So how do we know when we're obstructing our own emotion? Fear signals as unmoving worry and anxieties that actually decrease our focus and our clarity. So I know a lot of students experience this sense of anxiety where there's self-doubt and self-confusion, and don't even know what step to take or what move to make next, right? So that tells me that, okay, our fear is not moving, it's obstructed in some way. And how can we navigate either around or over or through this particular obstacle? So chronic stress, right? When our emotions are held at bay, of course, it generates this sense of pressure and this chronic stress. And chronic stress requires the ongoing practice of self-repair and support for our nervous system, because again, stress is inevitable, and we can't really, we don't want to eliminate it from our life, because we won't be evolving, we won't be expanding, we won't be growing, learning, changing in the ways that we want our lives to change. So chronic stress is a piece of that. But what's important to keep in mind is that as we're expanding and growing and pressure is building, that we're also self-repairing throughout that entire practice, through that engagement, in order for our nervous system to be able to handle all of the pressure of the stress. So common practices include, and many of you have engaged in these, of course. So for sensory relaxation, and remember that stress in our the vagus nerve is processing both the sensory perception as well as the emotional response that's overlapping it. And then it actually travels into the cognition up in the brain, where then we can make meaning of it and shift it, right? But typically we, in order to engage in relaxation, we will hit it from the sensory relaxation perspective or cognitive perspective. So sensory processing includes yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, breath work, ASMR. My students introduced me to that, those YouTube channels where they'll watch these YouTube videos of things that are relaxing, like kittens mewing or water flowing. EFT tapping. That's a process of actually tapping certain pressure points on the body that help to release emotions that happen to be stuck in the body. Cold exposure, so like cryotherapy, shaking. That would include laughing, yawning, yelling at the top of a mountain, yelling into your pillow. Sound therapy, moderate exercise, and nutritional and mineral balance. The nutritional and mineral balance, I also can't emphasize enough, because so much of our neurotransmitter activity and hormones are produced in the gut. So the gut-brain axis is really important, a really important one to look into. So cognitive restructuring, what does that look like? Careful examination of our beliefs and our thoughts. What kinds of thoughts are we having, right? Do we utilize a lot of self-cruelty kinds of thoughts? I'm not good enough. Artists are never going to make enough money to support themselves. I mean, what kind of beliefs have we absorbed and adopted? Behavior modification techniques include things like reframing and shaping and chaining. And that includes like the current relatively popular mindfulness practices of like writing I am statements, like I am achieving, my set of goals, or whatever those may be, or positive affirmations too. Meditation, guided visualization. So for many people who struggle with meditation, we have guided visualization, which is kind of like telling a story. There's this great app called Calm that will tell you a bedtime story, which will help reduce the literal sensory experience of stress in the body. Creative activity, because of course, any kind of creative activity will immerse you into that state of flow and return you to this sense of optimal experience. Imaging work, this is art therapy, does a lot of imaging work. So we do collage to sort of, to flesh out some of those subconsciously held beliefs or patterns of insecurity or thoughts about our relationships. Journaling daily. Developing a habit of self-repair and self-care is essentially where this journaling every single day idea comes into play. Morning pages or self-healing journals is relatively popular now. Of course, religious and spiritual or prayer practices have always been utilized for helping one shift into that state of mindfulness. And then really key, compassionate witnessing from either a trusted therapist or even from yourself, right? So compassionate witnessing is this non-judgmental, unconditional acceptance of where we happen to be in every moment. And that includes acceptance of the sense of discomfort that we're in the moment experiencing. So self-repair, I love the term self-repair instead of self-care, because I think that self-repair, we can perceive or interpret the notion of self-repair as this instinctive response that follows all experiences of stress, right? It's built into you. This is part of why we're hardwired for self-organization, is because we're hardwired for self-repair. And self-repair strategies include all the ways that we try to heal the trauma that was induced by the overwhelming stress. They often have the effect of numbing, escaping, distracting, comforting, or clarifying a traumatic memory. Commonly, we employ drugs, either pharmaceutical or recreational, food, video games, sex, talking, ignoring, artistic expression, parenting, disappearing, arguing, blaming, sleeping, insomnia, exercise or sports, etc. The list is endless. What is important is to, again, not judge our own personal instinctive self-repair strategies, but to become aware of them. In what way am I self-repairing? And seeing our excessive sleeping, even on the weekends, could be viewed from that perspective of I'm self-repairing. This is instinctive. This is a part of what I need to do. But all self-repair strategies have positive and negative consequences, right? So what's important is to examine the ways that we find ourselves obsessively requiring the assistance of one particular activity or strategy. And this can provide some clues as to the ways in which our chronic fears and anxieties have become obstructed from their natural ability to flow. And that deprives us of the opportunity for transformative personal growth. So the better we know ourselves, the better we heal ourselves through conscious choices, self-agency, and productive adaptation to life's inevitable changes. What sort of perspectives and attitudes can deepen an ongoing state of mindfulness? First is an understanding of self-soothing, the value of self-soothing. So it's important for us to find ways to feel safe and to soothe both the inside, which sometimes looks like taking deep breaths, relaxing with self-affirming self-talk, getting adequate sleep for neurological repair, also feeling safe and soothing on the outside, right? So accepting the mistakes and the deviations in our lives as opportunities for growth, bringing awareness to both the intended and the unintended consequences of our self-repair work. Self-soothing also looks like communicating more and better. So learning about both the subtle and the obvious patterns. Express feelings using accurate and assertive words like I feel, I want, I prefer. And then listening carefully to the inner cues and the stress signals like our gut reactions and the temperature of our heart and blood. The stress-induced illnesses, the current connective tissue reactions, and that means like, where your shoulders are getting tense, or any other body part. Practicing self-disclosure of emotional triggers with very careful intention, right? So this is also really important, is knowing who you can self-disclose your personal challenges and what triggers your emotional discomforts. Another attitude is to regain, or another important factor is to regain mental flexibility. Mental flexibility examines underlying beliefs, core negative beliefs that are adopted early, and to loosen our grip on those predetermined perceptions of threat, right? Softening areas of the mind and the body that feel rigid. We can shift our perceptions about our value, our sense of inclusivity, and our habituated patterns of behavior and thinking to enact more desired outcomes. What do we really want in life? And maybe we can shift our interpretation or our perception in order to move closer to our desired outcome. We can discriminate between our thoughts that serve our purpose and the thoughts that are sabotaging us. And we can let go of wanting to control the behaviors of others in order to meet our own needs, right? So instead of trying to have power over others in order to feel better, we have inner power to actually shift our outer experience. Another important component is engaged detachment. This means that we're interacting in relationships to people and work, etc., but we're detaching our essential value from the specific outcome. So we realize that the judgments or evaluations of others do not reflect our true potential or our authentic self, because there are always unforeseen and unknowable circumstances that factor into our performance and also the evaluation of our performance in the arena. We make time and space for the inner child to have joy and spontaneity and imaginative play during its practice. And we realize that mature creatives learn to work through times of feast and famine, and we're committed to ourselves first. We trust that life's unfoldment wants us to become the person that we're meant to become. And sometimes that road is very straight, and sometimes it weaves back and forth. Our becoming requires real nourishment in both paths for all the ways that we are hungry. And we have to be brave enough to nourish ourselves first. So we invite connection with all of ourselves, and especially the less desirable parts. We pause our busyness long enough to hear the inner voice that has become more quiet or been orphaned off or betrayed. And we invite them to speak up and to listen. We also reduce internal conflicts, because internal conflicts deplete resources and we always lose. If you're in a battle with yourself, you will lose. Allies ask questions. So how do we regain mindfulness in the moment of an acute or immediate spiral into anxiety or panic? We ask 0 questions, and 0 questions take us home to ourselves. They help us find the seed that is wrapped up inside a fragile husk. The seed is who we really are, who we really want to be. The husk is hard, but it's breakable and fragile and temporary. And it's the mask that we wear at any given moment that may or may not adequately protect or represent our potential within. A powerful question is one that reaches deep inside and brings forth an unexpected response. A good question pulls you out of the creative block and the fascination of thinking that you know what needs to happen or what will make you happy. The questions come from using what you already have, your criticisms or reactions, your judgments or your worries. And sometimes they sound like this. What was happening just before the strong emotion upwelled within you? What did you want to do? What would you do if you didn't have to? What if you could let yourself feel anything? What if no one will ever see this particular work? What would you make? What if it was okay to? What do you feel now? Where in your body do you feel it? And how did or do you self-repair? Are there parts of you that resist change and exploration, feeding on criticisms, comparison, and evaluation, obsessing over ideas of success and failure in regards to the final product of your creations can often take away the freedom of spontaneity, emphasizing the plan and encouraging you to form specific attachments to outcomes and expectations. The amount of freedom that you experience is a function of how much permission you give yourself. The thief of your freedom or creative joy is often found in your mind, burdened with ideas of good or bad, success and failure, and strategies that are meant to distract you from yourself. So when you're ready to live a questioning life without fixed ideas or answers, then you are ready to bear witness to every situation, no matter how difficult, painful, or offensive it is. Out of that process of bearing witness comes the right action of making peace, of healing. Making peace means making whole. This was a quote from Lynn Capitano, a well-known art therapist. So being a collaborative witness means to listen without judgment, to listen underneath the particulars of each and every story, to find the underlying energy of what is needed and to nourish that. As the images within us seek expression, new life comes into deadened disenchantment with new breath, and we can easily imagine better endings to our stories. The truth is, it's always scary if it's real transformation. It's always scary. There are real reasons why we stall in impending change or we play it safe. And sometimes instead of saying, I trust you, we can say, I trust that I can take care of myself around you. But we must remember that we are all hardwired for self-organization, for reorientation with inner equilibrium. And what we need most during our emotional dysregulation is to know that we are not alone, that our cries of distress will be heard and seen. We need connection. So do our students. So how can we incorporate mindfulness into the classroom? Connect with students, see them, hear them, tell them that they can be trusted to take care of themselves, that you support that. Help them to improve their inner game while helping them improve their outer game. Practice your own mindfulness until you become a consistent beacon of electromagnetic calm, comfort, and clarity. And that means know your triggers. Set intentional agreements with the class that all are valuable, all are included, and all are safe, regardless of their past experiences, like difficult teachers or grades, and their present difficulties, like they're moving or they're having trouble with parents. Ask questions that return agency to the student. Ask anxious students how they feel. Encourage students to doodle while they listen. This helps to soothe the sensory perception while they're engaged, right? Begin your class or embed it into the middle with a 5 or 10 minute Qigong practice or a meditation or an ungraded journaling prompt, because I like to say that sort of opens up the faucet and allows everything that is distracting them and drawing their energy away from the present moment. It allows all of that to sort of be expressed and filtered out, and then they can be present here in the moment without those distractions. Encourage benefit finding. So self-disclose the strengths that you gained from your difficult transitions in life. And lastly, here are a few links for other YouTube videos that maybe you may or may not be interested in. I think I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Molly.